President Trump gave a political speech. There was something for everybody in a red meat, fire up the base speech.
People get complacent. You just won, and now you're happy and you're complacent. Don't be complacent.
If we took a poll of this audience, I think he might do the mathematically impossible and be over 100%.
Breaking overnight, 4 Broward County deputies reportedly waited outside the school while the gunman opened fire.
Speaking for the first time, Officer Jeff Heinrich, who was off duty at the time, rushed in.
They're my family, those kids that, and teachers and staff that I've known for years.
President Trump announcing the biggest package of sanctions yet against North Korea.
If the sanctions don't work, we'll have to go phase 2. And phase 2 may be a very rough thing.
You don't mind if I go off script a little bit? Try like hell to hide that bald spot, folks. Hanging in there, right? Together, we're hanging in.
Please stay quiet a few more seconds. I just want to hear Mark C. Swift, okay? Thank you. Thank you. Hold. That is a great way. I'm sorry. I'm revealing a secret. I love her.
I do too. And now my whole family.
Listen, I gave my daughter Taylor Swift concert tickets for Christmas, and I can say it went over pretty well. Yeah, I know. Dad of the year here.
Dad.
He asked me if I had a bald spot, and I said no. And then I hear this from the producers, like, that was a quick no.
Yeah.
Like I've got this issue.
By the way, that's what happens before the camera comes on. You guys are talking about
they're
bald
getting in
spots.
her ear. It's like psychological warfare.
Well, the president clearly didn't
He joked
mind
about
talking
it.
about his.
He does have one. He's just very adept at covering it up. And by the way, his speech was not boring and purposefully so.
He said, I'm chucking it. And you know what? We hear this criticism. You know what? He won't make fun of it. He won't be self-deprecating. He's so, he's all about himself, the ego. And then he makes a joke. And I said, why is he joking about his bald spot? he keeps them all guessing and running around.
That was hilarious.
And he's really, the broader message, he's trying to rally the base there at CPAC and say, don't get complacent ahead of these midterms.
That's right. Let's take a look.
See, the word really is complacent. People get complacent. It's a natural instinct. You just won, and now you're happy and you're complacent. Don't be complacent. Okay, don't be complacent, because if they get in, they will repeal your tax cuts. They will put judges in that you wouldn't believe. They'll take away your Second Amendment, which we will never allow to happen. They'll take away your Second Amendment.
Now, what's significant there, Ronald Reagan spoke to this conference 13 times. He understood the importance of being in touch with that base. This is the core of the conservative base. President Trump clearly taking a little bit of a risk. You don't see politicians all the time saying, hey, listen, I'm going to be funny, I'm going to entertain you, but at the end of the day, I have one message, and that is we have an uphill battle in these midterms coming. We got to stay focused. Don't get lazy. Don't get complacent.
There was a lot of red meat in there, and you're right. This is a left, a Democrat Party that is highly energized. I think the Republicans are very satisfied with all the accomplishments, and he did a good job of laying out those accomplishments, but he understands intuitively that when you're happy, when you're content, things are going well. Republicans have, the state, they're running the House, they're running the Senate, they're running a lot of governorships. You get lazy and you go, we've got it all.
And you know it.
Yeah, so he's really energizing them, saying, hey, listen, you can't sit back. These Democrats are going to come to the polls in the midterms.
Well, yeah, and then another criticism I heard, because I was coming back from vacation, was he didn't get into gun control because the conservatives don't want to hear that. Well, first of all, a couple of days ago, I wasn't in town, but he had this listening session that was carried live on all the big channels, folks, radio, the internet thing as well. He's out there saying we got to have some sensible measures here. And actually, if you fact check this, in the speech to the conservative base, he said this.
There's nobody that loves the Second Amendment more than I do, and there's nobody that respects the NRA. They're friends of mine. They backed us all. They're great people. They're patriots. But they're great people. But we really do have to really strengthen up background checks. We have to do that.
So he said it, folks. So you can say he didn't talk about gun control. He said it there. And if that was not enough for you, again, the listening session, he was there with the families and the teachers, and he doesn't have all the answers. Congress doesn't have all the answers. They're trying to figure it out.
Well, and he just to point out, because Ed and I were talking just off the air, you know, it's amazing how far, just in the week you're gone on vacation, the debate has gone.
It started out as it's all the NRA's fault.
Quite predictably, the NRA is going to be where the criticism comes, and the president defending the NRA, standing up for it.
Unpopular, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second. The Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. And there are folks, there literally were people on MSNBC yesterday saying, is this really a right? Is this, it's a Second Amendment to the Constitution.
Well, Sheriff Israel was very quick to attack the NRA, probably because he wants to deflect from some of the information we're getting. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
I understand you're standing up for the NRA, and I understand that's what you're supposed to do. But you just told this group of people that you are standing up for them. You're not standing up for them until you say, I want less weapons.
Okay, well, this is important. First, let's get the NRA reacting to Sheriff Israel. Their tweet was, no, Sheriff Israel, you were the one that didn't protect these children, and that is your job. You run the largest fully accredited sheriff's office in the U.S., yet your office failed this community. Very important point. Whether you agree or disagree with the NRA, I'm just put it out, this is America, you get all the views out there. And on Wednesday, the sheriff had to know some of the facts that were eventually going to come out, that his team, that he said we did everything to try to save those 17 kids and teachers and the coach. We did everything, and he knew that wasn't true, and blamed it on the NRA and said we need gun control. And now the facts are coming out.
But the facts are coming out. It was very deliberate. He was trying to shift the blame. And if you watch that town hall, as I did, you would see that Marco Rubio and Dana Lash got far more pointed questions. They were put more on the spot than the police, than the sheriff or the FBI, who are actually responsible for the outcome in this terrible tragedy.
Put it in perspective. Perhaps why he's trying to shift the blame is because he knows that one of his trained deputies, Scott Peterson, stood there for 4 minutes listening to innocent children being gunned down. It was a 6-minute shooting. I think the video they have of him is about 4 minutes long. He was put up in March of 2017. Scott Peterson, the deputy that failed to act, was put up for the employee of the year, the sheriff of the year in the Broward County. And now we have the report that there may have been 3 other deputies.
And again, we've got to be fair to law enforcement. We care about law enforcement. They put their lives on the line every day, not just in Broward County, around the country. And more facts are going to come out. Maybe we'll find out more about this sheriff's deputy. Maybe he just made awful, you can't even begin to explain, I'm not defending it, awful mistakes, and maybe there are others who were trying to help. So you can't blame the whole force, the whole sheriff's department on this one person. But the guy at the top, Sheriff Israel, has made it like he did everything, his force did everything, and it's the NRA's fault. And the president.
Well, if you're pointing at the NRA instead of the mistakes, you know, as you said, it's very hard to be a police officer. I don't want to sit here and judge. I don't have all the details.
And that was a horrific tragedy that you can't even imagine being in the middle of it.
Exactly, but in this circumstance, this orchestrated effort by Sheriff Israel and the media and the Democrats to point the blame at Marco Rubio, at Dana Lash, at the NRA, at all Republicans who care about the Second Amendment, instead of looking at the very obvious problems, failed circumstances that happened within his own department, with the FBI and the tip, and the very credible tips. I mean, people were calling in saying, I'm afraid he's going to shoot up the school. He is going to explode. They told stories of him cutting up a baby bird on his mother's kitchen counter. This is a very deranged person that should have been locked up. There were failures all over the place.
And let me offer this. Last week we saw 2 more officers elsewhere in the country die in the line of fire for gunfire. So, you know, you're not going to find a network that is more supportive of law enforcement. Having covered a lot of shootings for Greta Van Susteren for a better part of a decade, they have a tough job. But at the end of the day, this unbelievable blame game is going around. And for Sheriff Israel to point directly at the NRA is unfair.
Just this past week, Frank Siller, who's on the show a lot, Tunnel to Towers Foundation, you can look it up. They're raising money this very week to help the families of those law enforcement officers, Maryland, other states who were killed this week. So we got to stand up for law enforcement. We also need accountability for what went wrong. What do you think about where this story started and now as the facts come in, how it's turning? Friends at foxnews.com. We're going to be reading and reacting all hour and all 3 more hours.
3 more hours.
DC is taking over. It's a good
The
thing.
swamp creatures
I thought it was
will
only
be
another
here
hour.
for another 3 hours. All right, now to your headlines and a Fox News alert. ISIS claiming responsibility for a deadly suicide bombing near the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan. The blast killing at least 2 people and injuring 7 in a diplomatic area near NATO headquarters in Kabul. In a separate incident, at least 18 Afghan soldiers were killed when their checkpoint came under attack by the Taliban. An armed woman is behind bars after ramming her van into a security barrier at the White House. The Secret Service saying Jessica Ford was carrying a pistol when she intentionally did the act. They've arrested Ford twice before for trying to climb the White House fence in 2017. Police believe she could be mentally ill. At the time, the president was finishing up a press conference at the White House with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. Paul Manafort maintaining his innocence as he's hit with new charges by the special counsel. Trump's former campaign manager now accused of secretly paying European leaders to lobby for pro-Russian groups in the Ukraine. Manafort also blasting his former partner, Rick Gates, for pleading guilty, the former campaign aide admitting to conspiracy and lying to federal investigators. Manafort says Gates lacked the strength to fight the allegations. Plans for President Trump's military parade are marching forward. The Pentagon is being ordered to plan the event for Veterans Day on November 11th. It's also the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. The parade would run from the White House to Capitol Hill. The president was inspired after seeing the Bastille Day parade in France last year, which he called magnificent. And those are your headlines.
That's funny because a lot of people in the media said he was inspired by North Korea and China. Wait, actually, the facts are that it was based on France and allies. It's so funny.
I can't wait for the parade. I mean, since D.C. hasn't had one of those in quite some time, I guess since the Gulf War.
After the Gulf War, yeah.
The Gulf War, so
Bush 41.
All right. Some in the media melting down over the latest charges in the Mueller probe.
Do you hear that? It's the sound of the drumbeat of indictments and guilty pleas.
He's the newest face to plead guilty, an insider who might know secrets within Trump world.
Do they have anything to do with Russian collusion? Charlie Hurt here to weigh in next.
And forget about man's best friend. How about man's lifesaver? How this brave German shepherd literally saved his owners.
Do you hear that? It's the sound of the drumbeat of indictments and guilty pleas in the Mueller investigation.
He's the newest face to plead guilty, an insider who might know secrets within Trump world.
Mueller's probe has been speeding along in recent days, as we've noticed, piling up indictments and guilty pleas. This may account for some of the frenzy by the president himself.
Well, a mainstream media meltdown after Special Counsel Robert Mueller charges former Trump campaign aides Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. I feel like we've heard this before, with this time tax fraud. But it begs the question, what does any of this have to do with Russian collusion? What does it have to do with the president? Here to weigh in, Washington Times opinion editor, Fox News contributor, and now rock star, we can add, because he's a rock star at CPAC, Charlie Hurt. Charlie, drumbeat of indictments. We have heard this again and again, and it's Rick Gates, and it's years ago.
Yeah, it's that's quite a montage you played there. It's almost hard not to start laughing listening to all of it. The truth of the matter is, obviously, this is very bad news for Paul Manafort. Rick Gates turned state's evidence against clearly Paul Manafort, but it means absolutely nothing for you know, making any sort of case about collusion with Russia between Donald Trump or his campaign or anything like that. And in fact, some of the charges in this newest indictment are you know, lies about you know, that occurred in the course of the investigation, and it does nothing to you know, to justify the original launching of the investigation in the first place.
Yes, and it gets back to lobbying and dealing with Congress before Donald Trump was elected president, which a lot of people leave out.
And I'm not belittling any of this, because you know, it sounds like some of these are very serious charges, but it's also you know, filling out forms acknowledging that you're lobbying. So it's not even that the lobbying itself is necessarily illegal.
Real quick, to be fair and balanced, though, Rick Gates did work in the White House, unlike Paul Manafort, and we don't want to dismiss either that he could be, I underline, talking to the prosecutors Prosecutors talking to Mueller about things he heard about in the White House, although there's no evidence or indication yet that he is turning on the president.
I would imagine that if Donald Trump could get into his way back machine and do things over again, he probably would have avoided any affiliation with Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. In as much as that is something that he would do differently, this is a problem. He wishes he didn't have to listen, turn on the TV and hear about every day.
Charlie, let's get to the important part. I mentioned at the top that now we have to call you a rock star. It's part of your contract. And it's because, you talked about the Trump effect on American politics at CPAC. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's been really fascinating. Obviously Donald Trump is not a partisan. He's not a perfect Republican. He's not a conservative in sort of the normal definition. But he's somebody who's comes to and I think for decades going on now, Republicans and conservatives have been sort of betrayed by these principled conservatives who made these promises, or these Republicans who failed to live up to promises. And he just decided to come in and sort of as a straight shooter, as a guy that was going to look at things in a far more practical way, less partisan way. And what the net result of it has been that conservatives have enjoyed more victories over the past year than I think that we have since perhaps Reagan or even before.
15 seconds, Charlie. Though now less partisan, but now to get people to turn out in the midterms, you got to be partisan. So can he pull the coalition back together?
I think enough people see that they are winning in enough ways